Greetings, greetings, peace and blessings. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another stream by your sister Yatira X. Um, I am excited to be here, happy to be here with with you all on this day today. We have an article that we would like to go on over with you all. So we're gonna have a quick commercial about our Final Call newspaper, and so please do enjoy this quick video. I'll be right back.
There is a need in our community for a universal change. And it has to start with the man. Being a man of God means being a man possessed of the knowledge, the spirit, and there is a need in our community for a universal change. And it has to start with the man. Being a man of God means being a man possessed of the knowledge, the spirit, and the power of God, anointed to do his will. To build a people, you first must make man. Every man, no matter what his color, no matter what his race, every man, in order to be a man, must be a man of God, or he's not a man at all. Let us make man. There is a need in our community for a universal change. And it has to start with the man. Being a man of God means being a man possessed of the knowledge, the spirit, and the power of God, anointed to do his will. To build a people, you first must make man. Every man, no matter what his color, no matter what his race, every man, in order to be a man, must be a man of God, or he's not a man at all. Let us make man.
All right, family. Thank you so much for bearing with us. You know, the beauty of being able to have children be a part of this work and this mission, you know, hey, bring them right along board. This is all part of home education, etc. So it's all good. We incorporate them in everything that we do. This is how we teach, we train, we learn. You know, we get better, we evolve, and we grow. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for bearing with us. This is information that we absolutely did not want um, to just not come here and not to have these conversations on. And so, if you have not subscribed yet to Final Call newspaper, let me be the first to invite you and ask you to take out your subscription today. to make sure that you are getting this information that you're not getting anywhere else to this magnitude, with this detail, with this passion and drive, to make sure that people are aware and privy to the information that is out here. And as I was preparing this stream today, I was even thinking on the children. I will always be one of the advocates that whenever you're hearing me talk about education, um, advocating and promoting us to take our children out of these public school systems, because they don't get to learn about ourselves. They don't get to learn our true history. They're not learning as a whole all across America properly, how we need to be functioning inside of society, just real history and things that will actually help us in evolution, in growing as humanity, as in evolving and being better people all around. So the Final Call newspaper is a wonderful tool for you, for your children to have access to this information, to read, to see themselves in these articles, but more so to learn about the world abroad, because it is an international Black-owned newspaper, and I do have mine here. And so you want to get yours. The information is running across the bottom of the screen to get your subscription, that you would need to just take out your subscription, and how you can do that. That information is running at the bottom of the screen there. Afternoon, my sister Janice. How are you? Thank you for tuning in. For real, y'all. Y'all need to make sure that y'all take out your subscription, and we will make sure that you get your paper every single week, right? So we can talk about that, but just text that FCN to the number that is scrolling at the bottom of the screen to take out your subscription today. And so everything comes full circle. And sometimes, I'm sure you have probably heard of that quote where it says hindsight, 2020 vision is actually hindsight. And so as I'm growing and learning, I look back to see who the first person that I recall saying, "Oh, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up," was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so I remember having this conversation with my sister when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I remember telling her, I'm going to be like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when I grow up. And I remember the tears that came to her eyes, and she was like, "But he was killed." And I said to her, just as matter of factly, I was just like, if that's what it takes to see our people free, that's what it takes. I don't care. I didn't care about that, and I don't care about it now. My life, when there's a people who, what does the Bible say? My people perish for a lack of knowledge, because they reject it. And so I think that it's important that we help to bring information, to bring truth, and to share and have dialogues, have conversations. That's what Speaking Life with Sister Yatira X is all about. Having these conversations in a place where we can learn, where we can dialogue. So at any point that any stream, future, present, future, whatever, that you are on one of the streams with me, and there's a topic, or the topic that's at hand that you want to discuss more, or share your comments and thoughts, please do that in the comment section. Again, whether you're on Facebook with me or on our YouTube channel, please do have that conversation, because that's what it's about. So it takes those hard dialogues to progress, to grow, to make changes if we're going to make them, So please, let's do that. And I will share more about my story with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. after we read the article, because it's just amazing. Like I said, this full circle, and still evolving circle, the relation between what drove me to him, because at this time in school, I didn't know of his revolutionary side. I didn't know that. We knew about, what his dream was, but that's all that they ever taught us in school. So where I am today, being part of Fard Money Network, going after the international bankers in the manner in which we are, providing economic options, opportunity, structures, that's what it's all about. So me being here, it's absolutely amazing. And today, is a day that the world honors and takes a moment to stop, and think over on this man. But I really want us to think and look at it from the perspective of truth, more of a more complete view on it. So with that being said, let us go right into this article dealing with our brother, and let us pull it up now. All right, so we're going to share the screen. All right, so here we have, and again, you want to subscribe and get your weekly edition of the Final Call newspaper. So here we're going to go right into this article. This is what I want to do, right? Yeah, so let's get into it. Okay, An Enemy of the State, by Anissa Muhammad, a contributing writing. While celebrations of a holiday in his honor focus on a dream, Martin Luther King was condemned but fearless in his last days. August 28, 1963, a man had a dream. By the time he had come to the end of his life, he had been to the mountaintop. But between the dream and the mountaintop, he would evolve, and he would see the ugliness of humanity rear its head. During the last year of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, he was harassed, ostracized, and denied by his own people, by major newspapers, and by the U.S. government. His stand against militarism, economic issues, and injustice all over the world cost him his life. But he would rather be dead than be afraid, was one of the last statements he uttered before walking out on the balcony of his Lorraine motel room in Memphis, where he was killed, according to talk show host Tavis Smiley, who authored the book Death of a King, the real story of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final year. He was climbing up the rough side, He was climbing up the rough side of the mountain at the end of his life, and everybody knows that the speech he gave where he says, "I may not get there with you," and "we will get to the promised land." And people look at that one speech and say, "Yeah, Dr. King knew that night that he was going to make it, that he wasn't going to make it." Mr. Smiley told the Final Call, "Well, it wasn't just that one night. Dr. King knew that many, many nights prior to that, because a year prior to that, he had given this speech and all hell had broken loose." April 4th, 1967, at the Riverside Church in New York City, on the very day he would die 1 year later, wow, Dr. King delivered one of the most pivotal speeches of his life, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence. During the speech, he linked the war on Vietnam to poverty in the U.S. and to the struggle of Black people. He called it a cruel manipulation of the poor, as young Black men who were already crippled by American society were being sent to kill and die. He spoke out against America's meddling in the affairs of Vietnam, condemned America for destroying and corrupting the people, and called upon the madness to cease. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of people normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death, Dr. King warned. He delivered the speech against the advice of his own staff. The press was given a written copy of the speech in advance. By the time he got done delivering it, the press knew everything he said. They had exact quotes because they had copies of it. I raised that because he'd never done that before, Mr. Smiley said. And by the time he got done giving that speech later that night and the next morning, they ripped him to shreds. The news media, the massive news media, the local media all across the country, they ripped him to shreds. And the headlines in these liberal papers, these liberal publications, Time, Newsweek, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, in total, 168 major newspapers denounced Dr. King. The New York Times editorial board accused him of fusing two public problems that are distinct and separate, and making too facile a connection between the speeding up of the war in Vietnam and the slowing down of the war against poverty. The Washington Post editorial board said King had diminished his usefulness to his cause, his country, and his people. After the speech, President Lyndon B. Johnson reportedly questioned, "We gave him the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We gave him the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We gave him the war on poverty. What more does he want?" Mm, mm, mm. Not only was Dr. King vilified in the major newspapers of that day, but the black media also spoke out against him. Carl Rowan, who was at the time one of the black nationalist journalists, said he was disappointed in his speech. It wasn't just a firestorm that came from the White House and so forth, said Dr. Ray Winbush, director of the Institute for Urban Research at Morgan State University, to the final call. "I was surprised, and I remember that period, that black folk, why is he talking about the Vietnam War? He's supposed to be talking about civil rights and economics," as if Dr. King only had one thing to talk about. He wasn't he was talking about throughout his whole life the issue of justice. Black civil rights leaders also turned on Dr. King. Roy Wilkins of the NAACP and Whitney Young of the National Urban League condemned him. Baseball player Jackie Robinson distanced himself. Colleges, universities, and black churches rescinded their invitations. Rescinded. Dr. King, up until that point, had never been treated so viciously by the mainstream media all at one time. King was the darling of the civil rights movement. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, but they all turned on him in a moment, Mr. Smiley said. Dr. Winbush attributed black people's treatment of Dr. King to the white gaze. There's some people who feel that if you say something against white people's policies, government, or whatever, they feel nervous about that, and they're under the white gaze. Dr. King wasn't under the white gaze, he said. As America turned on Dr. King, he continued his work in advocating for the poor and oppressed. In 1968, he launched the Poor People's Campaign with the goal of tackling economic injustice. He planned to camp out on the National Mall until Congress made a concerted effort to address poverty, but he was assassinated before he saw his plans through. They weren't trying to hear him on Vietnam. They weren't trying to hear him on the Poor People's Campaign. There's a target on his back. And lo and behold, 1 year to the day later, almost to the very hour, they killed him, Mr. Smiley said. After his death, Dr. King's wife, Coretta Scott King, and civil rights leaders Ralph David Abernathy continued the Poor People's Campaign, setting up an encampment named Resurrection City. Wow. The city housed thousands of people and lasted for 6 weeks until police forcibly shut it down, showing up in riot gear, evicting inhabitants, and making arrests. You know, you may think that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a dreamer. I beg to differ with you, wrote the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in an article titled, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., not a dreamer, but a man evolving toward a common goal for his people. Though Dr. King spoke at the base of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, the civil rights leader's views didn't end there, the minister said. He pointed to a different speech, the crisis in America's cities, an analysis of social disorder, and a plan of action against poverty, discrimination, and racism in urban America, to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Atlanta on August 15, 1967. In that message, Dr. King said, "The policymakers of the white society have caused the darkness. They created discrimination. They created slums. They perpetuate unemployment, ignorance, and poverty. So, when we ask Negroes, or black men and women, to abide by the law, let us also declare that the white man does not abide by law in the ghettos. Day in and day out, he violates welfare laws to deprive the poor of their meager allotments. He flagrantly violates building codes and regulations. His police make a mockery of law. He violates laws on equal employment and education and the provisions for civil services. The slums are the handiwork of a vicious system of the white society. Negroes live in them, but do not make them any more than a prisoner makes a prison, Dr. King stated. That's not the talk of a dreamer. That's the talk of a bold preacher who confronted the reality of white racism, said Minister Farrakhan, who spoke of Dr. King's courageous stand against the Vietnam War and America's global wrongdoing. Dr. King also pointed to a white backlash against justice and freedom for Black people, the minister added. COINTELPRO and the Black Messiah. Along with the public campaign waging war against Dr. King's character, the U.S. government, through the FBI's counterintelligence program, viewed his life as a threat. Dramatic pause. Okay. I think the key to the final years of Dr. King's life can best be understood from how the U.S. government viewed him and how he was written of by J. Edgar Hoover in the COINTELPRO memos, said Memphis-based Nation of Islam author, researcher, and student minister Demetric Muhammad to the final call. In the program's memos, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover discusses the rise of a Black Messiah and the candidates who would fit the role. He named both Dr. King and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the eternal leader of the Nation of Islam, as candidates. The two great Georgia-born Black men would meet each other on February 24, 1966. When he discussed the potentiality of Dr. King being a Black Messiah, he said that it would be dependent upon whether or not Dr. King would abandon white liberal doctrines. Integration was a white liberal doctrine. And Dr. King, at a certain point, said that he had begun to see how at least a temporary separation might be necessary en route to a fully integrated society. Demetric Muhammad penned an essay, Was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. a Black Muslim?, where he discusses Dr. King and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Like Dr. King, the Nation of Islam stood against the war on Vietnam, with Muslims, including Muhammad Ali, refusing induction into the draft. Dr. King supported the outspoken Ali's refusal to go into the armed services. When Dr. King began to make these kinds of statements, then J. Edgar Hoover began to oppose him more aggressively. They sent letters to Dr. King encouraging him to commit suicide. If he didn't commit suicide, they would make him the subject of a public scandal, Demetric Muhammad said. They also sent letters to his wife claiming that Dr. King had been unfaithful to his wife. Then it came out that even at his assassination, there were agents and informants, part of those who were close to Dr. King. Dr. Winbush described how, at that time, Dr. King was considered to be the greatest threat to American democracy, almost like an enemy of the state. He said, I fear that I am integrating my people into a burning house. And the burning house was the United States, the professor said. And when I look at all these ceremonies that will occur in a week or two, I say, man, King, what happened to the King that I knew? He was a rough brother. He shot pool. He hung out with people. People forget that he smoked, and that wasn't right. He shouldn't have been smoking. But now he's like Saint Martin Luther King or something. We should remember the King, not that they're trying to get us to remember, but the King that actually was, he continued. Dr. King's condemnation of militarism. Throughout his life, Dr. King saw a triple threat facing American democracy: racism, poverty, and militarism. The triple threat he raised then, racism, poverty, and militarism, are still the same threats that face our democracy today, Mr. Smiley said. If King were here today, we'd be found wanting. He'd be sorely disappointed on the real work that's being done, the real work that needs to be done on reducing poverty, eradicating poverty, ending racism, and reducing military threat in this country and around the globe, he said. President Joe Biden recently authorized $768.2 billion with a B, billion dollars in defense spending, a 5% increase and $25 billion more dollars than what was initially requested. The recent increase in military spending echo back to Dr. King's words on budgets being moral documents. Dr. King was saying to the government of America, your annual budget is a moral document, and look at where you have chosen to spend your money is an indictment against your claim to be a moral authority on the world stage, Demetric Muhammad said. So you put all of this money into the military, yet there are homeless people and people living under bridges. There are people who are living in poverty. There are people who are suffering. There are people who sincerely need assistance to be on a level playing field, that they might have a chance to live the so-called American dream. Dr. Winbush said it's amazing how presidents end their speeches with, God bless our troops, as President Biden recently did when addressing the January 6th insurrection. It sends a message out there. Don't forget about us being the greatest military power on earth and all the money, Dr. Winbush said. Your one cruise missile could fund the school budgets of several Black areas and towns in this country. One cruise missile, and that money is wasted. As America ups her military spending, Dr. King's family is pressuring the president and lawmakers who have stalled on voting rights legislation. They are calling for no celebration of MLK Day without the passage of federal voting rights bills. The family will not accept empty promises in pursuit of my father's dream for a more equal and just America, said Martin Luther King III, the oldest son of Dr. King and Coretta Scott King, in a statement. His sister, Dr. Bernice King, CEO of the King Center, stood in solidarity. She said if voting rights is still hanging in the balance by MLK Day on January 17th, instead of taking the King holiday off, they should make it a day on to pass the Voting Rights Act. Learning the real Dr. King. Dr. Winbush was a 20-year-old college student when Dr. King was assassinated. He said he doesn't think white supremacy has changed in terms of trying to suppress the history of Black people and people of color in America. People need to read Dr. King's words for themselves, he said. A lot of people don't know that he had a Chicago campaign, that he met with Malcolm, that he went to Africa and met with Nkrumah when Ghana became independent in 1957. They don't know that history because they haven't read anything about Dr. King. They look at news clips with him saying, I have a dream. I've been to the mountaintop, and that's all they know, he said. Demetric Muhammad said the reason the real story of Dr. King is untold is because of the corruption of Black history and those who work to reduce the potency of that history, meaning that you learn of Dr. King, but you may not necessarily be inspired as a revolutionary when you study Dr. King because they don't give you all of Dr. King, he said. They don't show you the evolution of the man. They don't show you his budding relationship with the Nation of Islam. So the reason that we don't see the Dr. King from 63 through 68 is because there are many young people who would be inspired in a revolutionary direction if they could learn that Dr. King was growing in a revolutionary direction. Mr. Smiley said, it saddens him to think that Dr. King died having no idea how his name would be lifted up years later. He was toxic. Nobody wanted to be around him. Everybody had abandoned him. He had no idea, could never have imagined when he died, when he was killed, that all these years later, he'd be a national and international hero, he said. He could never imagine there would be a holiday named after him or a monument in Washington on the National Mall where he was going to camp out with Resurrection City, his poor people's campaign, in schools named after him, in streets and bridges and libraries. People don't really know Martin King until they look at him in the last year of his life, added Mr. Smiley. It's easy when everybody's cheering your name and you're winning awards and you're on the cover of magazines and you're a hero to many people for leading this movement. It's easy when everybody's with you, but we come to know who we really are in the darkest hours of our lives, he said. When everybody's turned against us, when standing in your truth becomes terribly uncomfortable, these are the moments when we learn who we really are in our darkest hours. And in the dark hours of his life, when everything and everybody had abandoned him and isolated him, we see who King really is, he continued. What we see is that he does not back down. He stands in his truth. He doesn't compromise. He doesn't give in. He doesn't give up. He doesn't give out. And he went down swinging. All praise is due to Allah for our brother, Dr. King. And may Allah be pleased with him. Family, this has been a beautiful article. And I really pray that this has inspired you to look more into our history, to inspire you to make the revolutionary changes in our lives that we need to be. And so, as I promised you, making that relation to myself as a young girl, looking up to this man. And though I didn't know that full history, and though I didn't have all of those facts, it was something about his spirit that resonated with me, right? Along with the story my mother told me when she was young, that she skipped school on his birthday in honor of his life as well. And so I think a part of that also that was the seed in my mind. And so reading this and learning more about our brother and his fight, this is what inspired me. This is what I was attracted to. And so again, being the First Lady of Forward Money Network, where we are dedicated and committed. Of course, most of you already know I am a proud member of the Nation of Islam. And all of these things coupled together is why I'm here today, looking for truth, finding truth, and when finding truth, standing on that truth, speaking on that truth, and taking action on that truth. It is not enough for me to know truth, that I and my own family are here in our homes and we know the truth and we're just living our truth and that's it. This is truth that belongs to the people. I am not the author of this truth, but I prayed for truth. I asked God to reveal truth to me. I asked him to reveal himself to me. And so upon him most graciously answering my prayer in this way, I am duty bound to share this information and to lift up my story with my journey with our brother. And my hope is to inspire others to stand in truth in this day, in this dark hour. And the hour will continue to get darker. But those of us who know truth is a light. And so if we speak truth in this dark hour, hoping to reach others, striving to be and live that truth that we profess, or that we claim, that we believe in, well, then there will be more light shining in the dark, more hope in the dark, more inspiration in the dark, more life in the dark. And so I'm just moved. And so when it comes to the economic, we know that Dr. King, he coined that campaign, Redistribute the Pain, right? That the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan lifted up for us, 10-10-15, in redistributing the pain, up with Jesus, down with Santa, right? This is the time that we are in, where truth is being made known, and those of us who see the truth and accept the truth, we must be found sharing and living the truth. And that's what it's all about. So if you want to join us in Forward Money Network in this economic campaign, in this economic battle, this warfare that we are in to end poverty and want. We know that the dollar, as we just read, is constantly being printed, which means that the dollar is constantly going down in value. It is depreciating totally. It will be obsolete very soon. There will be no use of the dollar. And so we are teaching and we are educating at no cost for you to get the information, while simultaneously providing you a ready-made system for you to escape the fall of the dollar. Because in this time, and as this time gets darker, when the stock market crashes, people are going to be so devastated by this that suicides we will see climb because of this economic crisis. And so we are doing what we can do to share this information and to provide an out and exit strategy. Project Exodus, 10,000. Sometimes people read words and they get lost in translation because they're not lined up mentally, spiritually with what this is about. But if we can help save lives, because we know that life will be lost upon the fall of the dollar, because some people put their life on that dollar. And so it is on us that know the truth to lift the truth and to raise it and to share it with other people. And so to connect with us in Far Money Network on this economic campaign, on this war against poverty and want, join us. If you are on my YouTube channel, the link is in the description where you can click that. And if you're watching on Facebook, if somebody has shared this video with you, get back to the person that shared this video with you. And if it is just on my page that you're seeing this, then connect with me. Send me a message and ask for the link. It is also in my bio. But I invite you to make that connection with me, because as we move in this direction, it is all about building these bonds. It's all about building these relationships. It's all about building these connections. I'm a person that cares, and I am a person that wants to see us in a better position and in a better state of being, in a better position of life. This is the desire that I have. So when I ask you to message me, I'm asking for you to take that step in opening up lines of communication with me, your sister, right? And so I thank you all for being here today. Janice, thank you for tuning in. Wa alaikum salam, King. I'm so glad that you were able to tune in for a brief moment. Thank you for all that you do. My husband being the CEO of Far Money Network and the top paper pusher of this here Final Call newspaper, delivering this to the people that are out here in the highways and in the byways, the kind of work that you read about in the Bible, that Jesus, where he was found, in the highways and byways, distributing truth, saving lives, healing those who were ill. And so, husband, I thank you for your work, for your inspiration to our team, the leadership for our family, and a light to many, many, many others. So thank you, sir. And our brother Richard James, peace and blessings. Thank you for tuning in, sir. It is so wonderful to see a fellow wealth builder here. And look at the unity, the beauty in what we are doing. We are uniting together for a common cause to see humanity lifted. So that's it for me today. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for being here on this day. This is Speaking Life with Sister Yatira X, and we will have more in the upcoming days. But please, if you do nothing else, if you don't join Far Money Network, which we would love to see more people move in this direction, as you see the war and the reality of this economic plight that we are in, not just as a people and not just as a community, but the whole world over. But again, if you will subscribe, take out your subscription to the Final Call newspaper. Text the link, text that number that is scrolling on the bottom of the screen, and we will be so happy to add you to our customer list to make sure that you get your weekly paper in the mail. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, be blessed, be at peace, and continue to stand in truth. Sister Yatira here, signing off. Peace.
There is a need in our community for a universal change. And it has to start with the man. Being a man of God means being a man possessed of the knowledge, the spirit, and the power of God, anointed to do his will. To build a people, you first must make man. Every man, no matter what his color, no matter what his race,